Good afternoon. This is the afternoon commissioner conference on Tuesday. We sometimes have a lot to do and sometimes we don't have a lot to do. We do have HR here and I invite her to come up.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jessica Warren with Human Resources. I just have a couple items from Public Works today.
Okay.
First is a request to fill. Their office specialist has promoted into a new position, so they would like to fill her position. It's the front desk office specialist at Public Works.
We had discussed this before, isn't that right?
She promoted into another position with
Right.
the county, so
Yeah.
now they want to fill her position.
So we're just replacing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the next is a request to fill with the landfill. One of their solid waste operators has put in his 2-week notice, so they would like to fill his position.
Do you know who it is?
Kristen says he's a relatively new employee. I don't know the reason for leaving.
Oh, okay. Do you get to debrief him?
Yeah, we do exit interviews, so we'll be
Cool.
reaching out.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no problem here.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I got today. Thank you.
Made it easy, didn't we?
Do you have any miscellaneous, Rick?
Don't have any miscellaneous. Trying to think.
And Kelly?
Just a reminder that next week, there will not be any meetings except for the Board of Health on Tuesday at 10 a.m.
So next week, all meetings except Tuesday morning.
That is correct. The Board of Health meeting at 10 a.m.
Refresh my memory. The Board of Health meets this coming Tuesday.
Yes, they meet the 24th.
Right, and that starts after we're done with the normal Tuesday meeting, or is a normal Tuesday meeting not normal?
We are not having a normal Tuesday meeting, just the
Got it.
Board of Health.
Just the Board of Health. Okay. Thank you. No Wednesday either.
That is correct.
I could be really pestiferous. Okay, we have no hands up. We have one member in the audience here. Does that member wish to?
Is it
Okay.
because I'm new and is it appropriate to ask about a department and kind of what it does? Because I'm a little bit confused now.
Anything's open on the
Yeah,
table. This is
okay.
the only time we get to discuss.
Okay. And you can probably help me out on this a little bit. I was confused when our Department of Emergency came in for a personal property pathway. And so when I think of emergency management, I guess I'm thinking Mount St. Helens. I'm thinking big flood events.
Big freeway crash with a lot of,
Yeah,
casualties.
an earthquake and stuff like, if we have a flood event, it usually affects these areas. These are the routes that maybe can get out. These are areas we need to check on because they can be locked in. So does ours do that?
I'm with you on that, possibly both in spirit and in ignorance, because I have never seen it, never thought of it as anything but, which is almost a thankless kind of job.
Yeah, I would agree with that because Mountain Blue in 1980 had a flood event in 1996. I mean, these things don't come along every day.
Right. So Maytag.
And I
repairman.
get the whole idea of trying to be prepared for that type of stuff, but so I was really thrown off that we were dealing with personal property owners on.
Yeah, I was surprised. It may have been brought up before, but I don't recall.
Okay. There may be some questions I have for them next time they're in, because I'm just trying to get clear in my head what our expectations are for, or what the public's expectations are for
Yeah.
emergency management.
Yeah, I know we get funding to prepare plans. And that's kind of a thankless job, but that's really all DAM is for in the time when there are no emergencies. Now, they took a sort of an active part during the first response to COVID, but that was headed up by Fire District Two's chief in favor. They did a very nice organization. I wouldn't have classified it as an emergency. That's the last exercise.
Yeah.
Time.
And I'm by no means trying to blast anybody. I'm just trying to be clear in my head what our expectations should be.
Yeah, I don't know that we've ever really sat down and talked with BEM. Maybe you find out if Larry. We probably ought to have a meeting.
It'd be
Goes
helpful
up.
to me to understand. And if we have the ability to ask them to look at something, we're hearing more and more about concerns about Lewis and Clark Bridge.
Yeah,
And so pray to God, nothing ever happens there, but if it does, then what do we do?
that it's asking them, assume the bridge for some reason it's not usable. What does DEM have in its plans?
Yeah.
That's a valid question.
Yeah. Those type of, because we get there's a lot of commerce that goes back and forth there. And so that could really impact Cowlitz County.
Oh, it's massive. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what it does point out too is, I think when they find out if the bridge is not usable, we've got a terrible problem. And there are good reasons, and I've contacted some. There's good reasons to try and address that issue, even if that bridge alone is safe. I don't know. Assuming it is, we still have its unsatisfactory. Oh, you can imagine it's been
1923,
1923
I
Yeah.
believe. It's 100 years old.
ago.
Yeah.
Traffic has changed.
And it was state of the art back then. It was,
Oh, yeah, it was an
didn't get any
amazing
better,
bridge.
but
Yeah.
you know, a lot of things have changed in 100 years. And I think if God forbid something happened there, you would think we'd have some kind of idea where to go.
Well, I think also like we try to do is not have a single point of failure in any critical area in the county. That is one where I know Susan is listening. So she probably says, well, I can put a temporary bridge across.
Yeah, I'm sure she could.
Just teasing you. So I actually think it's it's part of the greater picture. So the valid question to DEM is what can we do? Valid questions. Does it really make sense to spend a fortune on IWOW without a
Yeah.
what if we built another bridge that would be an aggregate or an added way to go across there? Would we need an IWOW? The answer is probably yes, because it's trained, but it changes the whole analysis.
It changes the dynamics and what you would put there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I haven't heard any discussions along those lines. I have heard some of us have the problem, the bridge even before restaurants.
Yeah. Okay.
Really good question. So Susan, did you want to say anything?
We put you on the spot, didn't we?
I want to say anything about the bridge and what we do when it fails? Not really, because I don't think there is a good solution for a complete failure of that bridge. We'd be driving around, or as long as it took to get it repaired or something else in.
Yeah, that's actually quite a significant problem to have to drive around it. And the government, I should say, is typically not very good at spending funds to avoid a catastrophe. I'll give you a good example. This is a soapbox here. You can get a red light camera installed, but we still have antiquated traffic signal handling. By antiquated, I mean it hasn't changed in 50 years, I don't think.
Yeah.
And you ask why? Well, the answer is we cannot monetize improving the flow of traffic. While red light cameras, we can make a few bucks off of that. And that's why that problems gets solved. And here we have a similar situation where you want me to put another bridge there? Oh, how am I going to make any money off of it? Okay. So Susan, how much does a bridge cost? Just ballpark. Are we talking 50 million, 100 million to say duplicate that bridge?
Oh my
Ooh.
gosh.
To duplicate that bridge,
Duplicate a passage across.
I would say we're at that upper edge, 100 million or more, because of the shipping channel and how high we're going to have to be.
Yeah, now I'm told the height is actually considerably higher than it has to be. I guess there were ships, a lot of sailing ships going through at that time.
Yeah. I don't know, but
I think they model it based on what the river runs in April, which tends to be its highest elevation, and then the tallest ship that we're running now, and then add a safety factor. So it will be higher than you think it should be.
But not as high as the current one.
I couldn't tell you.
And okay. I didn't put my camera on. How offensive of me. Maybe I'm sparing people. Okay, has Public Works, or have you ever looked at the other bridges across the Columbia up around this area?
Have I ever looked at
Or
needing?
been somewhere where people are talking about doing something about a bridge up here?
You know who tends to bring it up the most? Me. I tend to say we need to be looking at the Lewis and Clark Bridge, and wouldn't it be a cool idea to put a bridge from Woodland to St. Helens? But I haven't heard it any more than everybody going, oh yeah, that would be a good idea. And people talking about it, that the Lewis and Clark needs replacing because we're having all the issues there, but nobody doing anything more than, oh, that's a good idea. There's nobody doing studies and getting the ball rolling.
Yeah.
You know, it almost seems that idea would be more cost effective than trying to fix what you have there. You just take the heavy trucks off of that and they'd run through the new one that's designed to take that. And if you're just talking commuter traffic, that would probably be fine for another 100 years. But
Yeah.
when you're trying to run 80,000-pound trucks across that thing, and it just wasn't designed for that. So I understand some of the concern.
So is there anything, how do we move it? Like, I'm in your same camp. It always seems to me like the bridge you mentioned is probably a pretty decent idea, and a bridge to help exit 21 by going through a bridge across the Lewis at the southern end of the bottom. Seems like it makes sense. But I don't have any facility for going beyond this almost idle chat.
The way things have happened before, like the last remodel of SR 432 and the progress that we've made with IWOW to get it as far as it has been a big community push with the cities, the county and COG all talking to our legislators and getting that going through them, because you have to get your legislators to push it, because it's not going to be a washed out issue, because they always feel like their projects in the Puget Sound area are more important. And right now their Southwest focus is on that interstate bridge, not on the Longview Kelso issue.
What is the latest on that interstate bridge?
I know they're still working on it. I am behind on keeping up with it, I will admit. They've been talking about it for the 25 years I've lived in this state, and I don't know if we're any further along than we were in the late 90s.
Okay. Maybe my next question is for Rick. If we were to suggest a toll to, so we build a new bridge, how would that be received? Angrily, I suppose.
Well, you know, that's how they built the Astoria Bridge. That's how the Narrows, the new Narrows one is being funded. I don't, you know, yeah, you're gonna have some grumbling, but I think overall, if people can see the product and what they're doing, got them some convenience or made it better for them, I think the acceptance is a lot higher than just they can't understand why you're taking money from them. At least that's a user-based payment system.
It makes sense. It's
Yeah.
based on the use.
Yeah.
So Susan, back to the interstate bridge, that tolling has been proposed any number of times. And it sounds like that has always led to nasty discussions. What's your take on that?
It always does lead to nasty discussions. Because there's no other tolling in this area. I know that Oregon has been talking about implementing tolls down in the Salem area. I think maybe when that goes in place, people in this area will become more accustomed to it, like they are up in the Puget Sound area with some of their roads and access being tolled. I grew up in an area where tolling was common, so I don't see it as an issue, because, you know, we went across this bridge, we paid $1.25, and we made sure we had $1.25 under the mat to go back the other direction. So it was just part of, once people get used to it, especially with the convenience they can use now with either East Coast, they call them easy passes in a lot of states, or the drive license plate photography, where you just get a monthly bill sent to you, or you charge up your easy pass and it just deducts from it. I think people will accept it because they're not inconvenienced by having to stop. They have to slow down a little, but they don't stop.
Well, some group of people will object to the privacy issue. If I just throw a coin in there and there's no camera, but we got cameras every place.
Yes.
Yeah.
And besides, how many quarters would we have to throw in to them the glass full?
Yeah.
Do we still mint 50-cent pieces? I haven't seen any in a
don't know.
long time.
But I think back east, tolls for roads and different things are pretty common, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yes,
they
they-
are. At least in Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, Boston. The Mass Turnpike will cost you a fortune to go from the west end of Massachusetts all the way to the east
Yeah.
end. And Florida has a lot of.
Most of the big bridges in Maryland are tolled. There's the Blue Line in Delaware. So yes, they're all over the place.
Do you think the objection here is because people think they already pay enough taxes into fuel? I can just hear somebody saying, aren't you charging enough? So it's basically a challenge to us, to the government, saying you are misspending the dollars. Otherwise, this would not be a problem.
Probably, and I'll just give you guys a warning, the fuel tax is an issue. They're discussing state level, moving away from a fuel tax and moving towards a user's fee per mile charge because of all the electric vehicles and our greater fuel efficiency. So they're looking at phasing out the fuel tax and making it a user's fee.
Yeah. Well, just so I can be clear, at least at the moment today, I think a toll makes good sense because it fits the category of you use it, you pay for it.
Mhm.
Yeah. And in history, the ones I've seen, when they are paid, the toll goes away. So
Yeah. Well,
it doesn't go on ad nauseum forever and ever.
I'm sorry.
It doesn't. It actually goes away when it's paid. It doesn't.
Yeah, that's probably a fear that it wouldn't happen here. You said it happened on the Astoria Bridge. There was a toll and
Yeah, that Story Bridge had a toll for years till.
there's no toll on it now.
No, not any
I think
longer.
the question is probably that, maintenance on those things should be continued. And I don't know, I'm not sure what kind of maintenance we have on the Lewis and Clark Bridge. They did repaint it recently.
Yeah,
In fact,
I don't know.
Susan climbing up there to
Stuff.
paint.
When I think of maintenance, I think that's where your gas taxes and your road taxes for maintenance. For
That's a good-
construction, I can see,
That's a good way of
toll.
looking at it.
yeah. You can't always pay for construction of a project out of maintenance funds.
Yeah.
So something else has to take place there.
That isn't unlike any other utility.
Yeah.
Okay, we've talked enough. Is there another issue?
No, that was one that just was kind of on my mind because I also, what I had in, you know, how you get something in your mind, how it should work, then you're hearing something, well, that isn't adding up. So,
Yeah. Yeah, one thing, just in case anybody not of the public is there, we don't get a chance to have any conversation at all without being in violation of OPMA or at
right.
least being supposed that we basically are. So this is a time when we can just sit back and if there's nothing else pending and just kind of talk about issues.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I talked a little bit about stuff I'm working on with building and planning. And what I didn't mention is we're also have reached out to Habitat and see how we can work into, I've had some experience with CAP, how we can work into what we can do as a county in building and planning and maybe through some dock fees. I don't know, that we have some questions out to council to see what we can do there. But how we work with them on that program, because that puts people in homes that are in that. I threw out a couple numbers today. That puts people in homes that are in that 60, 65 a year type range.
Mhm.
That if you're just out on the open market, there's no chance you're gonna
Right.
find a place, you know. And I've had a little bit of history, and in fact, I drove through the neighborhood in Castle Rock just the other day, Joshua Court, and it's well kept. I mean, it's just when you put something into something, there's some pride and some ownership. So it's good to see that.
Yeah, I completely on the same page with you. Is there something we can do with Habitat for Humanity?
We're working on that angle. The first piece we wanted to get in is something in a smaller scale that people can start doing. And what stuff do we need to get out of the way in from our side that's maybe inhibiting that we really don't, we can live without it. We just need to put it aside and start getting some stuff done.
From our side, you mean building and planning or the board?
Building and planning.
Okay,
Well, yeah,
and you mentioned dock recording fees, so just some kind of, you could see a place where we could advantageously use funding of some kind
we,
in conjunction with Habitat?
yeah,
Sounds good.
yeah, we've several questions that not only building and planning, but Gina and Human Health Services have put out for see what kind of response, how we use those fees to help that and put people in homes. You're not talking thousands of homes here, right? I mean, it's a small number, but at least it puts if we can get some families in homes, I think that just provides so much benefit down the road that.
Yeah, and I think you point out a key issue, the subsequent maintenance of homes. It's like, it doesn't take, you talk to any realtor and go on a drive with them through a neighborhood, and they'll be able to say, oh, that's a rental, that one's owner occupied, and that one's a rental. How do they do that?
Yeah,
So we all know the truth. It's just that sometimes it's hard to accept that if people don't have anything invested in it, they just don't take care of it.
yeah.
There's an ancillary thing in economics called the tragedy of the commons. Are you familiar with that term?
Mm,
Think about there are apple trees around here are a dime a dozen, but assume that they weren't. Apple tree in a main square producing the most delicious apples in the world. People will come in, and if you wait too long, everybody else would have taken their share and more. So you tend to pick the apples before they're at their prime. Or conversely, if there's a public restroom, as in Longview, they've already put the paint tags on, that some people have already vandalized it.
yeah,
That's not quite the tragedy of the commons. The apple tree is, but I look at those as almost the same.
yeah,
I once heard Walter Williams speak. You know Walter
Yeah.
Williams, right?
Yeah.
Amazing individual. And somebody was talking about some kind of tragedy of people owning animals. And he said, well, can you imagine you're in the 1880s, you're traveling on the train across the plains, and you lower the window, take your buffalo gun, and you shoot a bunch of buffalo just for sport. That was done.
yeah,
So do you think if those buffalo belonged to somebody, you could have done that? The answer is no, you couldn't have.
no,
That's another example.
yeah. Yeah,
Private ownership is really key to any success in any
I,
society.
I strongly believe that.
Yeah.
And I think we can, like I say, we're not gonna build thousands of things but we can help some and get it.
Well, the unintended consequence of that is pushing the obvious fact that if you work for something, it's worthwhile. And so just that, you don't have to do too many before there's an attitude change.
Right.
And that's a good unintended consequence.
Yeah.
Although it's intended on my part if I were
Yeah.
to go along with that. So I had mentioned earlier, and then you sort of quipped back. Are you discussing also trying to kick back the fees at the completion of a job?
Yes. For ones that we can put in these homes that fit these levels. And
Yeah.
once they have a home and stuff, we will get that back. And I don't know, it just feels like it gives them a incentive to get things closed up and done. Now, some of these smaller ones you call cottage homes or whatever you want to call them that you're working on, there may not be a lot of fees. I mean, if they want to do a septic, there's going to need to be something for that, or they want to do a well, but they're small. You could do an incinerator toilet. You could do a compost toilet.
Yeah,
You know, I mean, there's some things, if you didn't want to hook the power, maybe you could hook it solar and it would generate what you need for a small home. I don't know all that, but there's options.
that's super good thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's in discussion of building and planning of
Yeah.
allowing that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've often struggled with the idea of government wanting to tell you how to use your property for your own benefit, your own good.
Yeah.
And I can see a commercial building where people have an assumption that it's not going to fall over or collapse, and that does require standards, but a barn on your own property,
Yeah.
maybe the house on your own property.
Say, a maintained structure. We have homes that are probably built in the 20s down around the lake, and they're maintained. They're no threat
Yeah.
to fall over. I mean, the designs and what they used back then is still relevant. Most of it is still relevant today. It'll still hold. It'll hold up and do what it is.
There's some pretty old homes out in Massachusetts I've been in. Now, sometimes the toilet's off at an angle, but
Yeah.
that's okay. You get used to leaning. So along those lines, a precious thought just of a nest. So we were talking about, wow, that's terrible.
Telling people what to build on their own property.
Uh,
Is that where you're going?
Yeah, that's where we were last, and that sparked another thought, but then
Oh,
I was
okay.
trying to concentrate on what you were saying, and that caused me to lose the thought. It's your fault.
Yeah.
You're used to that now, aren't you?
Well, well, you know, it's my belief that a big part, you know,
Oh, I got it.
go ahead.
Okay, so several years ago, I thought, even though I was asked to keep my hands off of building and planning, I thought competition always improves things if it's honest competition. So I thought, what if instead of having to get a building permit for a single family dwelling or something like that, you could have someone else do the inspection. Or, yeah, you'd have someone else do the inspection, and there's a lot involved in that. And the one thing I thought would be required would be something that involved title report companies. So when I buy a house, I want to see, this house was inspected by Rick Dahl, or was inspected by the county, and make my purchase decision based on that information.
Yeah.
And you know very well that there'd be a few dollars there for the guy to, a private company to inspect. And we would then have an idea of, we wouldn't feel quite so trapped, and we'd have to perform it. But I was told, title companies you're familiar with them far more than I am, but I feel that they're not interested in doing anything except collecting the fee. Paying out on that? No.
Yeah, that's a little difficult. I don't disagree on I like competition, and I think you can work alongside private enterprise. You know, our departments could work alongside private enterprise, and it just could help the whole process. One of the things I like about private, say Rick Dahl did that inspection. He's got a private company. I have some liability if I really mess that up. So the consumer has the ability to, if I really obviously screw this up, and I told you, you built it on this, and you do this and this and this, you're not going to have any problems with this land or it sliding or any of those type of things, I hold some liability for that. When it's done by a government agency, I don't think that's there.
It's very hard to sue any
Yeah.
government agency.
So you take away some of the ability for an individual to have some recourse if I don't do it right versus how you gonna.
Yeah, there's another one which sort of an ancillary area, not tied specifically to homes, but today we talked about defendants. And I have a gnawing feeling that the victims aren't as well taken care of as the perpetrators. Now, if you take a look at the way we do school, the way we do all kinds of things, school's a good example. When I first came to the United States, I went to a school that had different tiers within one grade. So if you were in the lowest tier and you got all A's, you moved up to the next tier and so forth, and you kept on moving up. And the idea was that for some people, some things are important, some aren't, but the school is to certify not that you attended, but that you accomplished, that you've reached some level of capability in the subject. We don't do that anymore. We don't have programs for the overachievers. We've got the programs for SPED, as it call it, special education. And the number of people in that are fairly substantial. As a general statement, society should invest in the people that will carry the society forward. You look at a sports team. What if the Seahawks decided not to buy the best talent they could get, but to buy the talent that they felt more emotionally attached to? After a losing season, things might still go, but 3 seasons of that, and you might as well shut the stadium down.
Yeah.
And we know that that's kind of true, because today, if you were the coach and you lose too many games, you're out. And if you don't perform as a player, you don't get your contract renewed. In fact, you might get your contract terminated.
Yeah, because it'll have some performance clauses in
Yeah,
there.
performance clauses, right? I knew we'd get back to that. So when we look at success stories around, we always find competition.
Always.
Yeah, and when we find
Always.
problems that continue to grow, we find subsidies.
Yep. I don't disagree.
No comment from the citizen? I know we'd elicit something eventually.
It's good to see you. We don't get many citizens to these things.
So I thought I'd try it out.
Yeah.
I'm pretty interested in what you've been talking about, some of the ideas. I feel that the way that government is structured as far as permitting and so on like that, I kind of take offense to it, that you have your own property and you know what you want to do. But you got to go get permission, and they sometimes go as far as you can't put up your own rafters and build your own trusses. That's got to be engineered, stamped on it and so on. And that adds an additional cost. I understand the reason why they want to keep the house from falling down, but so does the owner. But if the permitting process was more on a voluntary basis, you could approach a government where they would have a place where you could have engineers that were there to give you information about what's the best way to do something if you wanted to do it, maybe an unusual or not traditional structure, how they could help you to see that that be a sound building. And then there would be a certification opportunity for you that you could have them certify it, come out and inspect it, you'd pay for that. And the advantage of that is that when you were to dispose of the property, you would have a certified building. And it's more up to the owner to have some decision-making as to what they're going to do, rather than everything is determined by the government.
Yeah, agree completely.
Yeah,
When you get the government involved, then people tend to shirk responsibility. It's not my problem. I'm going to build it as shabbily as I can. I met the specs, even though I know it's not quite right. But it's check the box.
but earlier in my career, I did home inspections on construction as part of the bank. And you'd walk in and they'd be built to the specs, but you could tell who like glued the stairs down, or, I mean, there's just
Exactly, yeah.
little things that you go, okay,
Isn't that stud just a half-inch too short?
yeah. I mean, you can see those type of little things where some will just shortcut it a hair, even though it's within spec. And still get it done.
Yeah, in all of this is sort of the general discussion that we pay a price through permits and a whole structure organization. And that is to prevent how many bad events from happening?
Yeah.
So we don't do a cost analysis. It costs the public a huge amount of money or to do all of this, to what, save some half a dozen people from doing something bad?
We do that in everything though, the people that do things right pay the bill for the few that do things wrong.
Yeah,
And it's really backwards, but that's the way we do it, you know? Yeah.
do you take your shoes off at the airport to get in? I mean, that's an example of what
Yeah.
a pain that is for
Yeah.
one guy who decided he had, yeah.
Yeah.
So long, did you have other stuff? Feel free.
Well, just along that line, it's difficult to know that we're in a free country, but when you try to deal with those kinds of things, and part of it is because in a city, your structure may affect another structure. So I can understand that concern. If a person was in a country where he had 20 acres and was to build a building on it, it may fall down, but then that's his problem. Whereas in the city, your house falling down or anything like that creates a reduced value of the adjoining properties.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not going to allow me to put an iron smelter downtown, are you?
Yeah. You know, I've said before, and I say, I totally believe in person have the right to do what they want with their own property. But I also believe that the people around you have the right to not be affected beyond a reasonable metric.
Well, that's
And
kind of,
sometimes it's hard to, where you find that metric to say, yeah, this is reasonable and this crosses it over unreasonable.
that's kind of
Easy.
interesting that in the Constitution as written as generally protecting the rights of the individual, and those rights come from God. But then what's the other part of it? The other part of it is that there's a law that you ought to be living by, and that's written in Scripture. And if
Yeah.
you live according to those, then you shouldn't have problems with
Mhm.
your adjoining neighbors. But that's why they say that.
I agree with you. There's two homes if you've ever been to Virginia City, Nevada, it's up out of Reno. And there's It was an old mining town. And there's two homes on the end of town, like you're headed down into Carson City, that are like this far apart. Well, what it was a miner built his home and then he got into a beef with his next door neighbor that had the lot there. And the guy built it just as close as just to tick him off. And those homes are still there today. I mean, you couldn't walk between them. There's not, certainly I can't walk between them. I don't know anybody that could.
Are you suggesting I should go on a diet?
Yeah, well, but you don't want those type of things, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of a difficult thing, especially when you already have something established that's been working. To try to redo the whole thing. But sometimes the impingement upon people that have property feels like those rights that are protected are not protected. I don't know what the answer is to it, but I would think that there'd be some method of dealing with it where a person could have more opportunity to choose the structure, the type of structure and so on like that. And now we got a greater thing, as I understand it, on the state level, that they're going to require heat pumps in all new
No more
structures.
gas.
I don't know that
yeah.
that's fair, you know.
No,
because-
it's not close to this. Is an issue that just escaped my mind too, as I was thinking about the gas problem. I'll think about it in a moment.
You know, and I don't know how many years ago, it's been a long time. Remember reporter John Stossel?
Yeah,
He did a report on what's the biggest cost of things. And he broke down, and I can't remember everything he broke down, but he picked all these different items and the costs associated with them. And it wasn't the cost of manufacturer, the cost of product, it was the cost of regulation. And I think you find that same thing in houses. I think a lot of the price of a house is a lot of different regulations. So when you talk about affordable housing, if you need to start peeling, get sensible and start peeling some of that back and making it better for people. They just, you know, as you say, now they want heat pumps. Well, those don't come free. And the reason for them for every house, how do you make a case for that? That's crazy.
especially when you look back at the pioneers that come across
Yeah.
and set up whatever shelter was necessary for the time, you know, those times kind of gone by because nearly every county has regulations that don't allow for that sort of thing. But I don't like the threshold, like you got someone that's homeless and you want to get them in a home, there's a big threshold getting from the point that you're homeless to the time you can actually enter a
Yeah.
home. And that threshold is real troubling.
Yeah.
because
Ever
they
brought
can't-
that up? I think we were having a conversation with Frank. And I kind of brought that up. I said, how do you get somebody that goes through and you've got them employed and they're ready to move on, where do they go? Because
Yeah,
there's really nothing in the next line for them to go. And I think that's what we're trying to do a little bit with building and planning, is putting at least some options out there.
Is there anything that could be done that would, where, say an organization or individuals could, take a sponsorship? In other words, I have from time to time had people that's kind of down that I've taken into my home. But there's a lot of individuals that need that kind of sponsorship, but I don't want to take them into my home. I have a little bit of judicial thinking, if I'm going to bring
Yeah.
somebody into my home, that's risky. And if there was a facility that you could sponsor someone and then pay a fee for them to be there while you're lifting them up so that they learn what they need to do to be successful.
There are all kinds of thoughts that go through, but when we deploy our boys to Iraq, say, typically they're going to live out in a tent, but it's not just a crappy tent like you're going camping. There everything else is nice amenity. My point being is that we don't have anything where somebody can go and live a relatively Spartan existence so that they don't have to spend a fortune on housing and they can sort of build themselves up. In 1975, the brand new house built was 1,000 fewer square feet than the house built in like 2010, and I don't think it's gone down since then. So our appetites and our belief of what is reasonable is really very strange and conducive to the problem. The safety issue is one that weighs heavily on my mind. I would only let someone in my house that I knew intimately. And that's maybe the guy that you pick up off the freeway, maybe not, but more than likely you're looking for a lot of trouble. I've helped people in the past, and what has turned out to be is rather than improve themselves, they count on your help. Seriously, even going back to college, there was a Colombian, and I ended up doing his homework until one day I said, "This isn't the right thing. I can't do this anymore," and he left. But people think that we don't want to help people. We really do want to help people. We don't want to enable stuff. And the thing I'd forgotten about is, say a person buys a home, finally ends up through many years retiring. They thought they were going to be able to keep their home. And what's happened is that they start to lose their home because everybody around them was voting in for, like in Kalama, a new police station, a new school, and they end up being priced out of their home. Meanwhile, they've sort of been growing up under the promise that Social Security was going to be there exclusively for them. And of course, that really hasn't worked out. California, back in 1970s, I think, had Prop 13, which simply said, if your taxes were $100 and you were still the owner of the house, the following year, it could only go up by a very small number. So you will have people in a house, and that's the unfair part. The person in this house is paying $2,000 a year in taxes, while the person in this house is paying $15,000 a year in property taxes. But we're kicking retirees out, I think. And the inflation is just another element of how we're taking money away from the citizens.
The inflation is, Ronald Reagan called it, and he said the inflation has the cost of your free stuff. And it's true.
Yeah.
It's like anything. The more you have an oversupply of cars, the price of the car is going to go down because they're going to try and move them. You have an oversupply of $1 bills or $100 bills, the value of each one is going to go down because there's too many of them. And so we've had this past year, well, if you go by the government number, it's a little over 8% inflation. So the purchasing power of your $100 bill is no longer $100 that it was in January 22. It's going to cost you $100.08 if you want to go by that number. If you want to throw energy into that, it's more like 32%. So, and the stuff isn't free. It's just, it's costing consumers a ton of money. They go into, now realistically, they're going to cut back on some things and do some things, but it's still the purchasing power that they have. If you're at 32%, what you used to be able to buy in 12 months now takes you 16 months to do. And I just don't think that's right to do that to the
Well,
working. man
Some
and
of that's
woman.
out of your hands, though, because you don't have that control on the money.
I
the
don't
money
have
supply gets
control over
large
that
enough.
printing press. They keep throwing those IOUs in those folders.
We do have control over our own attitudes, and
Yeah.
part of the value of this job is a bully pulpit explaining the truth. Along those lines, just there are a lot of retired people, and they think that $100 bill in their pocket means wealth. They don't realize it's a claim on the productivity of somebody producing something. And when we decide that they're not going to build a factory here, they're not going to build a factory there, and we don't like that, eventually, that $100 bill, they might as well eat it because they'll get as much nutrition out of it as anything else because they
Yeah.
stop production. They just don't see beyond, well, I really want everything to be pristine as it was when, am I allowed to say this? Christopher Columbus did not come over.
I'm glad you guys are the ones doing this because it's a headache.
Well, I appreciate you coming and conversing with us a little bit.
Yeah, if you see us cry a little bit, you'll know why. Yeah. Thank you. So we have no hands up. There was one Q&A. Did you get to look at that?
Yeah. Susan's, I didn't look at the Q&A. I appreciate Susan was nice enough to put up with us and to have a discussion.
Yeah. Yeah, when I think of optimism, or try to be optimistic, I think of Public Works Department as a big portion of the county, and they're very well operated.
Yeah,
And
I agree. I think they're moving in the right direction and we share the same value that, our job is to serve this community.
yeah. Okay, I don't know their tenement housing exists in Longview and Kelso. Just take a look at them. Okay. Well, shall we call it?
We can call it.
Okay, thank you, everybody who bore with us. Thank you particularly to Susan and the gentleman who spoke with us earlier. This meeting is adjourned.